Men are allowed to experience emotions, but to what point and for how long does it go on to affect his life and control his life? This is actually a conversation I'm willing to have today in a really vulnerable way around our wayward emotions that we experience. Hello and welcome. I'm Dan Ballard. Thank you for dropping in. My vision on this podcast is to provide you deep insight in a digestible way so you get condensed practical wisdom and knowledge that you can apply in the real world to help you grow. I'm a personal growth mentor with 12 years of professional results, helping you master your emotions and energy and feel confident so you prosper. Welcome to this episode. I hope you share and enjoy. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I perceive the world emotionally. I'm quite a sensitive person. I have grown up with a childhood that taught me to be hypervigilant, meaning very emotionally, perceptively reactive to my environment. And it's actually a genius adaptation from the inner child so that I can find safety and meaning in my world. So what I've learned about my nature is that I also have an obsessive mind, an obsessive brain. So it's really easy for me to understand what people are, or have an idea about what people are thinking, what people are feeling, what they're experiencing. And then what I do is I internalize all that, and it can actually pull me in a spiral because I have quite an obsessive brain. So on this journey to understanding myself and to better understanding my own thought patterns and how my emotions color my thinking and pull my life under, I've actually been able to also heal my life, but turn that limitation that I was experiencing in my life, which caused me a lot of anxiety, into my power. And I think that because I've experienced it and I've got wisdom around this, I think it's very important that I share vulnerably about wayward emotions and how they affect our lives. So this has actually been inspired from a post that I put out on my Instagram, and I shared it also in a bit of an expanded version on my Drop In With Dan email. And it read this, that men are allowed to have wayward emotions, but to what point and for how long until it controls his life? So there's to give you some context to what that question and that statement is, that there's really two scenarios that can play out here. And we'll cover this now. You've walked in from work. You can feel the hostility at home. She has rolled her eyes and then she nags about the dishes. So two scenarios can play out here. This is just a general context, right? Scenario one, let's cover that now. From that opening situation I've just painted. You react, you make it about you, and you defend yourself. And then what's happened there is you become disconnected. But scenario two, you take a breath, you get curious, you reflect, and you realize that for whatever reason, it's actually an empty cup in her. And you've seen and identified that. So you listen with presence, you place your hand on her back, and you ask, how has your day been? She then begins to soften. Then you can ask, how can I help you? I can see what you're experiencing. You then create a connection. And this really pulls us into this main idea that I know in my life has actually been, it's been a hard learning curve, but it's actually been a very, very important learning curve for me as a man. And that is that in relationship, we are either in connection or we're disconnected. There's no middle ground. There's no state of neutrality in our relationships. We are either connecting in our intimate relationships or we're disconnecting. And the same actually happens with that intimacy that we feel and experience with the world. Because if you can't feel free in relationship, then you can't be free in any other area of your life. Our relationships, what they serve a variety of purposes for us. And at different levels of consciousness, we experience our relationships in different ways. But objectively, what they do is they act as a safe haven, a place for your innermost self to come out, the inner child, the inner psychological self to come out, to be seen and integrated into your life. And what that does is it leads to a life of greater fulfillment because you're integrating yourself on a deeper level into your physical life experience, and the space between your innermost self and the idea of who you are in your head begins to close. And what happens there, we get to feel that state of inner peace. and anything we do in our life becomes a happy activity. Now, where a lot of people create a lot of suffering in their life is they think that the relationship for their lives is there to make them happy. And when it doesn't, they actually become sad, they become controlling, reactive, and what happens is it leads to disconnect. And that disconnect they feel in a relationship bleeds into all other facets of their life. How? Well, because often people don't realize this. They don't realize that our relationships are a place for our inner child and our wounds to come up hopefully in a really safe container where we get to be seen, heard, understood, appreciated, and nurtured, both for the masculine and the feminine. And it allows ourselves to integrate who we really are into our life. But when we have this idea, and we have this idea in our head that our relationship is supposed to make us happy, and that it's actually not a task for our innermost self and for our heart to connect to our mind, then we miss the mark in so many different ways, because we create this subtle expectation of this person has to be this way for me, and when they're not, I become disappointed. And what that disappointment does is it brings up all this frustration, this agitation, maybe even this resentment, because things aren't going the way we expect them to be or the way that we want them to be. But often what's happening in our relationship is that it's our shadow self. It's the parts of our ego. It's the parts of the past that our mind is constructed to keep us safe, that are actually coming out from the underworld, and they're projecting into our relationship. And if you haven't heard that before, it's actually a very important opening to talk about. Veering back to what I said, there is no neutrality in relationships. We're either disconnecting or connecting. Now, coming back to that scenario and about the two ways in which we can navigate this in relationship, which is actually a very, very hard thing to do, and why I wanted to talk vulnerably to you today about this, is that we either avoid or we employ a way forward. Okay, we either avoid or employ a way forward. So coming back to that scenario, you've walked in, you can feel the hostility, there's resentment, there is frustration, and first thing we do is we make it about ourselves. We think, what have I done now? I've been at work all day. What do you mean I've taken the bins out? I've just earned a living for my family. Often it's not about us. There's particularly for the feminine, there's often unmet needs. There's something that the woman's cup feels empty, whether it's coming from you or it's coming from what she's just experienced in her own self. And what we do is we make that about ourselves. We project our own fear, doubt, and insecurity into that moment, and we start to create disconnect. Whereas when we're really regulated and we have that emotional control and we have effective communication between both people, we experience that connection. And as I said, avoid or employ. So we can avoid, we can react, we can overthink, we can self-victimize, and then we disconnect ourselves. But what we can also do is we can employ. And what are we employing? Well, it's regulation, it's calm communication, it's curiosity, and it's connection. Rather than jumping into the situation and thinking you have to defend yourself or control the situation for a great outcome, often what we need to do is we need to create a state of calm, create some space between ourselves and the situation, and see if we can observe the unfolding of what is experiencing, and what is unfolding in that moment. And that is really where a man's greatest power lies. A man's greatest power is in his presence. It's in his ability to be able to perceptively understand what is happening in the moment, in his woman, but also in his world. And he's able to regulate himself and be able to use the present moment to then enter the best place or position for him to either hold space or to offer what is then going to be the best gift in that moment, if that makes sense. As I said, it's regulation, it's calm communication, it's curiosity, and it's also connection. And the funny thing about this is it's really, really hard to do. I want to preface what I'm talking about with understanding that it's very, very hard to do. And often I find it the most hard to do when I'm tired, when I maybe haven't had a good day in business, or I haven't had much sleep. I just feel a bit off my center. I haven't done as much self-care as what I need to that day or week. But that's the time when it's most useful. I often find myself reacting in relationship and getting snappy and making the situation about me more often than not because I've just missing my own mark. So in those moments, if you do catch yourself, and it's about this process of constantly doing this, you want to catch yourself out when you are reacting and responding from a state of hurt or something in you that feels like you're not enough and you need to defend yourself. There's a lot of power in being able to catch what's going on, step back, observe the situation from a higher perspective, and then enter it, allowing your feminine or anyone else in the world for that matter to relax into the present moment. What I'm talking about really isn't an easy task. I want to preface this conversation with that understanding. It's not easy at all. It requires time. It requires self-awareness. It requires constant attention, and it requires a harmony between both parties. I'd love to do a podcast one day soon where I talk about this with Katie because, there's so much we get wrong in a relationship as well. We're not alone. But what makes our relationship really good is that we don't stay mad for too long. I feel like in relationship, I'm the one who has the tendency to come forward quick and say, hey, look, what's actually going on here? How are you feeling? What needs aren't being met? What am I not bringing to the table for you? Or maybe what have I missed in understanding about you? She'll often talk about what's going on and where I may have missed the mark. I'll talk about how I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing, and she'll self-check as well, and she'll go, oh yeah, I can see that. I understand you. But this doesn't, but. And then this starts this conversation where we actually unravel what we're experiencing together. Now, at first, it doesn't go that way. We actually have to challenge ourselves, to take ourselves out of the way, to swallow our pride, and to move into connection with each other. The times when it's most hard to do that, I've wrote that in the email and also on the post as well, is that when we're tired, when we feel dysregulated, when we have stress, we haven't been eating good, nourishing foods. We've spent a lot of time on social media and also on our screens. That's when I experience a lot of this turmoil, this friction. When we haven't created space in our life or in our mind, and when we don't feel like we've done enough in our day. So for men, I think that's quite a close thing to share, because I believe all men experience that in some way, shape or form. But on those days when I feel the most tired, when I feel the most frustrated, and I do project my hurt, my own inner limitation, my fear, my doubt, security into a relationship, I know that if that's happening, it's up to me then, as the lead in that relationship, to be able to say, well, okay, I'll take a step back. I see what's going on. I place my hand on her back and say, actually, you know what? I'm realizing that I'm projecting a lot of my own frustration onto you here. What's going on for you? Why are you feeling the way you're feeling? And this opens up this dialogue, this connection point between her and I that creates a grounds for both of us to find a lot more harmony in ourselves and also in the home environment. That harmony between us, no doubt, then carries over into all facets of our life. And that's going to be particularly important as we come into parenthood together. There's going to be a lot of swallowing our pride. There's going to be a lot of those moments where we may want to disconnect, and we may be so mad at each other or something might be coming up. But both of us know, we're in agreement to this, is that when it does, is that we accept what's happening, we accept our wayward emotions and what we're experiencing, and then we move into greater connection together. And we do that through having uncomfortable communication. Kate and I both know this between each other, and I think it's the most important thing in a relationship, is that clear communication is kind communication. Unclear communication is unkind communication. So clear is kind, unclear is unkind. You can't expect your partner, you can't expect the world to mirror back to you that which you want if you're being unclear on who you are, what you're experiencing, and where you want to be. Whatever you're withholding in your relationship, you're actually withholding in the world. So in those moments where I'm experiencing a lot of my shadow coming up and I'm projecting or Katie's projecting at me and I'm experiencing all these wayward emotions, it's actually up to me to realize and accept that, yeah, I'm experiencing these wayward emotions. But to what degree and how long is this going to control my life and affect my relationship and my home environment? That becomes a choice then. And that's where it's most hard to do this work. But it's actually the most important time to apply this work, when it's most challenging, when you want to disconnect, when you just think, fuck it, I'm not going to address it. I can't be bothered. I haven't got time. I've got to focus on my work. But I guarantee in those moments where you most feel like disconnecting, if you push forward and have those challenging conversations, you address that limiting behavior or what you're experiencing, I promise you that the world will open up. It won't close in. That's the benefit here of having conscious communication and dealing with our wayward emotions when they happen, or as close to when they happen as we can. So they don't bottle up, they don't store up, and they don't disconnect us in our relationship and also in our purpose in the world. So to close this, I actually left you with an action task in my Drop It With Dan email. If you're not yet on my email list, I'd love you to join. You can go onto my website and just enter your email. It's one click and you're on. So the action here I want you to take is to actually deploy your leadership. And this is not an easy thing to do, as I just said. It requires awareness, presence, practice, skill, and time. Next time you notice your tendency to react or to make a situation about you, challenge yourself to create space, take a breath, and cut through the resistance like a samurai. The question that accompanies this, and I pose this to you, is how do we level up our self-care, our communication, our emotional regulation, and connection to improve? Today's offer is my Prosperity Mastermind to you. So if you're a man and you want to up-level yourself and you want to break through, kill your passivity, and form this unshakable confidence that goes on to helping you form a strong frame in leadership that you can lean on, you can improve the quality of your relationships, you can get highly focused and get clear in your direction and purpose, then this 12-week growth container, this cohort that I run, it's an incredibly powerful experience. It starts just under a month and I'm actually looking for 8 more men. So just like we did on the email, you can go onto danballard.online. The information is right there. Just click on Mastermind. It will reveal to you what it can offer you. And it's a simple process. You need to apply because it runs through an application process. And I can see with you if it's going to be a good fit and if it's going to deliver the results that you might be looking for in your life. Thank you for your time. I'll see you in the next episode.